Welcome. We're live now. So we're on.
All right.
Tim Hendrickson, I'm joined by today. He is a U.S. Army veteran captain, serving 2 deployments in Operation Iraqi Freedom as a combat arms and military intelligence officer. And welcome. Thank you very much on this Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day to you. I love the shirt.
Thank you. Yeah, happy Veterans Day to you too. Thanks for having me on. It's great to do this.
You know, I wasn't going to do my first episode for this new venture. The exchange starts in January, and I said to myself, I want to do a Veterans Day special, get a vet on, and it's a very important day. There's a lot of issues that need to get addressed, and a lot of experiences that I wish people would know about. And I figure, who better than my good friend Tim? Tim and I have known each other for a very long time, so thank you for doing this.
Sure, yeah, it's our pleasure. It's we go all the way back to high school and everything. So
yeah,
absolutely, love to do this.
I've never asked you, and I'm curious, what led to joining and serving? Like, what led to being, motivated to join the Army and go through you went through ROTC, I know that, but what gave you that motivation? What made you want to do it?
So you could say a calling, I guess you could say, is the simplest way to put it. It stems from a family tradition. We've had at least 3 generations that I know of that served in the military. So both grandfathers in World War II, my grandmother in World War II, who prior to my commissioning was the highest ranking out of anybody in my family that served. She was actually a second lieutenant nurse stateside here in World War II. My uncle was a door gunner in Vietnam, and my father, the only Marine out of the family. Everybody else was Army, but my father,
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My father, the only Marine, was stationed in Okinawa during Vietnam because the Sullivan Law was still in effect, and you couldn't have 2 brothers in the same combat zone at the same time. So because my uncle, who was about a year or 2 older, was combat infantry, my father was stationed in Okinawa. He was motor transport, so he was fixing vehicles and everything from Vietnam that had been attacked or broken down or whatever. So he spent that time there. So obviously a family history. And then I'm one of 4 boys from my father and mother. And out of the 4 of us, I just felt the calling. Even from a little kid, I asked, at Christmas time, I asked for sets of camouflage and jungle boots, and I was practicing low crawling in my backyard when other kids were out playing t-ball and stuff. It's just something I always felt called to do, something I knew I was gonna do. As I went through high school and it became more serious, I started exploring the options of, am I going to enlist? Am I going to go the officer route? Am I going to pursue a military academy or the ROTC route? So I had to kind of sift through all of that, but it was always a foregone conclusion that I was going to serve. And I would say even before I got in, when I was making those decisions, the dream was that I was going to be, a 4-star general one day or something. Like that was it. I wasn't banking on anything else. It was, it was going to be the career in the military, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do 25 years later, kind of thing. So,
like a patent. You were thinking patent. You were thinking big. Well, that's the way you got to think. You got to think big, right? When you're doing something like that.
Now, I didn't have other plans when I was 18. It was going to be, I'll be in the military for the next 20 years, so I'll figure it out when I retire. That kind of thing.
Now, the Marine Corps, and you went Army. Your father was a Marine. The little competition ever since you joined the Army between you and your father.
Yes. I mean, I think those rivalries never die down, and I think the Marine Corps especially likes to just rub elbows with the rest of us and shine us all on, whether it's Air Force, Navy, whatever. But yeah, that exists a little bit. We do like to rib on each other every now and then on the Marine Corps Army differences. I always get on him because the only reason he became a Marine is because he has a fear of flying. And when he reported his older brother, and he decided to volunteer because he knew he was going to be drafted. It was 1968. So he's like, let me volunteer. I'll get a choice of my job if I volunteer versus just getting stuck in the infantry. And when he reported into the recruiting depot, they said, everybody that wants to join the Army, go over here at 0300, you're going to fly out. And everybody who wants to join the Marines, go over here. And at 0300, you're going to take a train down to, down to basic. And because he doesn't like to fly, he took a train. That's the only reason he's Marine. But he'll sit there and destroy the rest of us because
Right.
The Marine Corps is the Marine Corps, and no one else lives up to them. So
Once you go through boot camp, it's a different experience. Then you get to talk a lot of shit. Once you get to that boot camp, it's like, all right, I may have taken the train, but now you talked about you were thinking between enlisted and officer. What brought you to the officer rather than enlisted? What were you thinking?
Well, the guidance originally came from my father, being a boot Marine, going through the enlisted things, doing tasks that Marine Corps privates are tasked to do, and he kind of had those. I won't get into the details here, but if you've ever seen Jarhead, you can probably imagine the scene that I'm referring to, that one Marine is doing near the latrines. But he basically said, I would much rather you shoot for the officer ranks because you have the potential, you have the ability. Sorry, the dogs are going crazy. You have the ability and the potential to lead men and not just be a boot on the ground. And I always appreciated that. He kind of cultivated me that way and said, I want you to take that next step. If you're really going to do this in the family line, the family tradition, you should go that route. And so I did pursue it, but I never closed the door on enlistment also. My biggest thing was I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get my degree. And there's two routes to do that. There's the academy and there's ROTC. And so that's where kind of I was deciding from that. But if I couldn't, I came from a working class family. If I couldn't earn a place in an academy or get a scholarship through ROTC, we couldn't afford to send me to college. So basically, I was going to serve one way or the other. And the determining factor was, do I get an ROTC scholarship or do I get into the military academy at West Point? Or am I, my grade's not good enough, my placement not good enough, and therefore I would have to enlist. But it was never a question, between those things. If one happened versus the other, I was going to be serving no matter what. It just so happened that at Hofstra University here on Long Island, I applied for and received one of the two scholarships that was available that year. It was actually a smaller program at the time. I think all totaled, when I was a freshman, there was only, as I was an incoming freshman, there was only about 20 cadets in the program for Hofstra. So very, very small. They only had two scholarships allotted to them. One of them was a 4-year that they gave to a young lady, and then I received a 3-year going in. So even that, I had to go back to my parents and say, Hofstra's an expensive school. Can you swing a year of me going there my freshman year, and then my scholarship will kick in sophomore year? And luckily, they were able to at least do that. It did benefit us in the long run because that same young lady who received the 4-year scholarship, after her first semester, she decided that ROTC program was not for her, and she backed out of it, and the program gave me her second half of the scholarship. So my parents only ended up having to pay for one semester of school for me, but that's how I got there.
Well, that's amazing. And I guess living the experience as an enlisted myself, I guess if my sons ever said, hey, or my daughter, what do I, I guess I would urge them towards the officer route, because I guess the living standards for enlisted aren't, you're out in the field, like living in the field at all times.
Sure.
Officers definitely get a little bit better in the back end, of course.
Right.
But deployment, everybody's in the shit together, and everybody lives like crap.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you're enlisted or officer. When you're deployed,
Yeah.
it sucks for everybody.
I was bunked up with 4 field artillery guys in my, first deployment. So, we're all crammed on top of each other. It doesn't matter. It's all good.
Everybody's grunts by then. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I would go the same route, like and that's pretty interesting that the program only had 2 slots open for scholarships.
Yeah.
So everybody else within the program had to pay to get in ROTC?
Right. So ROTC is very unique in the way they give out their scholarships is they would rather you join the program first and receive a 3-year or 2-year scholarship. So there's a ton of those that go around through the Army program. And I'm sure the other branches do it the same way. I know the Marine Corps does their ROTC a little differently, but Air Force and Navy operates the same way as Army. And that's essentially because the cadre wants to get eyes on you and see that you're actually committed and you actually want to serve the country and not just have a free tuition paid for and free room and board paid for. They want to see that you're serious about it. So after a year or 2 in the program, you can get awarded a 2-year scholarship to pay for the back half of your college education. The high school scholarships coming out are kind of fewer and far between because really they're taking a shot on an unknown. You can come in and you have to have the grades, the extracurriculars, the athletics, demonstrated leadership potential in the things that you've done coming up through the high school ranks. But at the end of the day, as it was the case with my freshman year and my colleague that got into the program with me, you don't really know until the person starts doing the program whether they're truly committed to it or not. That young lady chose to leave, and that's fine. But that's why they are less apt to give out 4-year scholarships right out of the gate because they want to, see what you're actually going to put into the program first and foremost.
I guess it's a big investment money-wise. The government's paying for these programs. They want to ensure that they're not wasting money on somebody that's not going to finish the program.
Yeah.
And because you are an asset to the military, you're an officer, you're, commanding troops. They want to ensure that if you can't get through the first semester and, then why invest all that money in you? So I get that.
Yeah.
How does training and school work out? Like, do you do, like, how does ROTC work out when you're doing training to become an officer? You're learning how to lead troops in battle, and then you're trying to balance your college education. How hard was that for you?
Right. I actually, probably because this is exactly what I wanted to be doing my whole life up to that point, and now I was actually doing it, so I ate it up. I didn't find it very difficult at all because I wanted to be there. Most cadets want to be there, even if they're just exploring it for a semester. They're giving it their all because they want to see if this is truly a route that they want to do, so you didn't really have people sandbagging it too much. The academic load is pretty easy when you're first starting out. Your freshman, sophomore year, you only have class once a week. We did have to do physical training 3 days a week. So we would go to PT just like every other military unit in the world, and you'd hit that at 6:30 in the morning and go running around campus, and we'd call cadence and wake everybody up who had been hungover from the night before. So we were real popular on campus when we did that. But as you move on, you would basically have an academic class, and then we called it leadership laboratory, which was field applications. So you might spend the classroom learning how to shoot an azimuth and compute from grid squares on a map to what the actual degrees are on a compass and how to switch those things, compensating for the curvature of the earth and all that stuff. I'm getting technical, but those are the kinds of things that you would be learning, basic military skills that everybody needs to know early on. And then you'd go out into the field in the afternoon leadership laboratory and actually get handed a compass and handed a map and say, hey, we want you to walk your pace count out. We want you to kind of do these land navigation routes. And we would do all sorts of activities like that. As you move into your junior and senior year, the focus then really starts to come more onto the leadership aspects, right? They've been teaching you your basic military skills, wearing the uniform, cleaning your rifle, doing land nav. But now it's, okay, we need to apply these basic skills, and you need to teach the junior classmen, the younger classmen, freshmen and sophomore coming in, you need to teach them the skills that you've learned, and you need to march them from room to room and from the building out to the leadership laboratory and start cultivating that leadership ability so that when you graduate, you can go off to your basic training and then your first unit and have that confidence to step in front of a platoon full of Joes that knows you just spent the last 4 years in college, and from day one command their respect and show them that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, and you're there for the same reason that they are. So that's really where the focus comes into. It is a bit of a juggle when you're talking about, yes, you have to pass all your other academic classes that you're taking in order to get commissioned, because you need to have a degree. If you don't receive a degree, you don't get commissioned. So I always say, looking back, I probably could have partied a little more than I actually did, but at the time I would, spend nights studying and working on papers and things because I didn't want to lose my scholarship. I wanted to achieve that goal of my degree and therefore my commissioning. And that was my focus, rather than, going out on the weekends or on a Thursday night or something like that. So I probably took myself a little too seriously back then, but in the long run, it paid off because I achieved the goal that I set for myself. So
laser focus, yeah. Did you notice other people had some struggles, like, because you maybe they weren't like as prepared for what, like, holy cow, what did I get myself into? And like, how did people handle that? Like when you're going through a program that, like, it's a lot of time. Sure. I remember actually growing up how, like, those, you were always busy during that time, and it takes a lot of time. So some people who may struggle, how did they adapt and push through? So a lot of people lean on each other.
I would say absolutely. You see the foundations of that, and certainly when you're a junior and then even more a senior, that's where more leadership opportunity came for us as cadets to really look at incoming freshmen and sophomores that were serious about the program, but were having a hard time, maybe not just with the ROTC itself, but the adjustment to college life. Like, hey, everything is up to you now, and you need to figure it out. And guys and gals having a hard time. I'm late to this class. I can't get this paper done. I'm falling behind on my PT because I'm up late, writing a term paper. And so those are coachable moments. Those are times when you, as a senior, and you've been in the program for 3 years, you can sit there and talk to them and say, okay, look, you got to set schedules for yourself. You got to knock this out here. You can do your PT in the afternoon, or you can go to the gym as a substitute if you have, a class that has to get accomplished, things like that. People would definitely work to help out because the ROTC unit was a close-knit unit. Even though it was very small when I first started, it had grown by leaps and bounds. We had over 100 cadets my senior year. And so we took it, my fellow seniors and I, very seriously, that we had built up this program. We had put Hofstra ROTC kind of back on the map, and we wanted to see the junior classmen and those below them succeeding. And so we took it upon ourselves to make sure that they got coached through that. Inevitably, people would struggle with one thing or another. And that could be as much as just the physical requirements of, maintaining your physical readiness and passing the Army physical fitness test, which was the same standards as everybody else in the line units and active duty. So we had to be able to pass that and maintain that, or the academics. And then you just kind of saw where people's commitment really lied, because if they wanted to be in the program, they'd put the time in for extra physical training and they'd lose the weight that they've been carrying, their whole lives, or they'd say, hey, this isn't for me, and they drop out. It's too difficult to do all these different things, and they move on. 9/11 did change a little bit of that too. I was in my junior year when the planes hit, and suddenly we went from a peacetime military to, guess what? Everyone in this program in the foreseeable future has the potential of going to fight an enemy. We didn't know who the enemy was yet, but we all knew we're standing in the door, as you would say, in an airborne unit. And that changed a lot. And people, I don't blame them for it, because some people joined ROTC simply to get their college education, right, and they were going to serve the 4 years, and they were going to go on active duty, but they were going to go on active duty in a peacetime military. And the thought of, hey, now I'm going to get shot at for the next 4 years. I didn't sign up for that. And, rather than fake it and still trying to go through and not having their heart really in it, they said, this isn't for me. I did not want to do this under these circumstances. And they took a step back. And I respect that. I would rather them say, this isn't for me. I'm not here to be leading troops in combat. That's not what I thought I was signing up for. And you kind of take it with a grain of salt. You're like, well, you were joining the Army. Right. There's always that potential. But when you've had, all those years of peacetime since the end of the Gulf War, the thought of that actually happening was, none of us were thinking was going to happen, and then September 11th changed that all. So.
What I was going to get to September 11th. What did you think when it happened? What was your feeling? Like what did you say to yourself? Like, now, you were prepared for it. You thought about it as a kid.
Yeah.
Like you said, you've been running around training. This is what you want to do your whole life. Now, boom, shit hit the fan. What did you feel that day?
Yeah. So I think it would be safe to say I felt a mixed bag of emotions that everybody felt that day. And certainly I was angry. I was furious. I mean, this was our generation's Pearl Harbor, so we were attacked and everything. And then I was scared, because I certainly knew that the landscape of my service was going to change here, and that I was certainly going somewhere, and going somewhere very soon. I had already decided to go into a combat arms branch, and I had chosen armor, so I was going to be a tank officer. I already knew that at that point in ROTC. So basically knowing that within a year of graduating, I'm going to be trained as a tank officer, and then that's a combat unit, so I'm going to see combat. So that's a scary thing. Nobody wants a war, but at the same time, you have to, if I was going to be fully committed to the service that I wanted to do, I had to be ready to fight that. So that's really where my focus shifted that day. Was, I'm angry, I'm scared, but even more so now, I'm determined, because this is exactly what my country is calling me upon. This is the circumstances that people that join the military realize, this is what we train for. This is what we're here for. And the country needs us to step up and, ensure our freedoms, our protections, and go out there and bring justice to those that have attacked us and wronged us. So when you talk about laser focus earlier, I mean, that was a pivotal moment where there is no more fooling around with this. It's time to step it up a notch, because my whole military career just turned into a combat career, and I knew that towards the end of that day. I knew that's what I was facing. So the seriousness of it and the determination basically skyrocketed for me. Yeah,
it definitely changed my outlook. I was enlisted, and I was stationed in Japan during 9/11.
Yeah.
And banging on that door early in the morning, and like, yeah, it was like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
I had such a nice. I was just looking forward to going out on the weekends in Japan, getting trashed,
Right.
on the weekends, enjoying. I'm going to Hiroshima, partying, and then all of a
Right.
sudden, nope, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, machine guns out on a post. Then they send me
Yep.
back to Pendleton. It was like a whole. I was like, whoa! I was having so much fun. What happened?
Right.
Yeah, it definitely changed life for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Now you deployed at some point after ROTC. When were you deployed over? You did 2 combat tours. What were the years and the times that you were there?
Yes, commissioned 2003, and I worked as a gold bar recruiter for my ROTC department, recruiting underclassmen into the ROTC program because my orders for basic wasn't until November of that year. So I graduated in May, commissioned in May, and then had orders for November 2003. So I was in basic officer basic course until basically the end of March of 2004. And then I was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division. They were already in Baghdad. And about 3-4 weeks after I graduated, they had one of the largest battles of the Iraq War over there in Sadr City. So that was something really unique because that was April 4th, 2004, which was this major fight. It was basically kind of the birthday of the insurgency over there. And I came into the unit. I traveled to Fort Hood, Texas, was assigned to the unit and deployed about 6 weeks after they had already been in country, but they had already fought this major battle that I had missed. So I came in and I was already kind of behind the curve because I had all these soldiers that had now seen and tasted combat firsthand, extended combat. The battle lasted days, and then there were combat operations going on afterwards after that one fight died down, but then all the raids and the daily patrols and everything going on. And so when I got there in 2003, I spent probably my first 4 or 5 months working a desk until it was time for me to take over a platoon. So my Joes had already been in for 6 months, and at that point they're salty.
Yeah, I was gonna say salty guys that have been in. They get
right.
real cocky, and they're like, "Who's this new guy?" Like right. It could be hard for somebody who's now coming in to take command as right. a leader, especially with the officers. Like I've seen it. The officer enlisted sometimes can have a little bit of friction when you're new to the unit, and they're like, "Huh, this guy," So that must have been an adjustment for you. Now you have to lead guys and ask for them to trust you.
Yes, and not only trust you, but they know that you're greener than green, right? They've been out on the roads for 6 months fighting and running and gunning and doing everything that they need to do, and they know that you've been behind a desk, so they know you have zero experience. I mitigated that as best I could. When I was working my desk assignment, it was very rare. I had one of the few jobs that I only had to work 8 hours a day. When you're deployed, you're usually doing at least 12, I would say. And when you're a platoon leader, you're just working around the clock, constantly. But that 8-hour-a-day assignment, because I had 2 non-commissioned officers that would work the other 2 shifts, that allowed me to work the day shift, and at 4 o'clock, I would go to the line units and I would see, hey, which of you guys are going out tonight? Who's going on patrol? Do you want to give one of your guys a rest so I can ride along with you and I can ask questions and I can experience what it's out to be outside the fence and kind of get my feet wet so that when it's my turn to finally lead a platoon, I haven't gone outside the wire, yet. And that would be, I knew that would be a very big knock against me. So even though they knew I was green, I hadn't been leading troops, I hadn't been going out on patrol in command of them, I had been going out during my 6-month time to kind of teach myself what to do. And then really it comes down to your preparation and your confidence as a leader to be able to step into that role and be able to immediately recognize, hey, I'm not going to come in here and start bossing everybody around and changing the way you guys do things and making you uncomfortable. Like, if things aren't broken, we're not going to fix them, but allow me the opportunity to learn from you, learn how you do things, evaluate how you do them. And if I feel that we as a platoon can improve on things, let's kick the idea around. Let's try it out. Let's go with it. And then I would also say, at the end of the day, my word is final, so I'm not going to do something stupid without your buy-in. But if it's the difference between, well, we could do it X or we could do it Y, and they're both pretty good ideas, and I choose to do X, that's my decision as your leader. And I think that really solidified the confidence of my soldiers coming in, because they realized, all right, this guy isn't a hot shot. He's not just going to start barking orders and wielding his second lieutenant bar like a broadsword and make our lives miserable. He's here to work with us. He's here to make sure that we stay safe and we all get home together, because ultimately that's my responsibility as an officer, right? I need to make sure that you all get home to your families. I need to make sure the decisions that I make and the actions that I take are not going to put you in undue harm. And at the end of the day, you all have your digits still attached to you, your 10 fingers, 10 toes when we get home. So that was my mission. That's how I approach it. And I think coming into that very tenuous relationship of taking over guys 6 months into a combat rotation, that allowed me to win them over very quickly.
That's an immense responsibility for a 23. I think you're probably 23, 24?
Yeah,
22 22 at the time. I've learned over the years now, I mean, we think when we're 18, we're like adults and we know everything. You're
Right.
still kids at 18. You're still young and barely becoming an adult at 22, in my opinion now, as an adult at 38. I
Sure.
could say, maybe, but that is a huge responsibility. Did you think that the training prepared you more, or more of because a lot of people could go through training, and when they get done with training, they still don't have the leadership qualities. Even though you've been trained to be a leader, you could still be a crappy leader.
Right.
You rely more on the training, or just like your sense of, this is what I want to do. I understand how to get, talk to people and getting to people to trust me. And is it more like a natural thing for you, or was it the training mostly?
I would say for me personally, it felt more natural. It's just something that kind of cultivated. You see it if you wanted to really go back into when I was a kid and everything, but growing up, I was on student council, and I was on, I was the captain of the wrestling team my senior year, and always kind of seeing these leadership type roles that I sought out for myself, and trying to achieve that. The training certainly does cultivate that. So like you said, not everybody has that inherent leadership ability, but you can be trained to lead people and do things correctly. The biggest thing that I would say is it was a mix, even though mine leaned more towards the natural side of things. But I had a great captain in my junior and senior year who he gave me a good piece of advice. It said, every leader you encounter has a different tool that they utilize. And what you need to be doing is taking whatever tool it is that they offer you and placing it in your own personal toolbox. And then it's up to you to decide whether you want to use those tools or not. So he's basically saying, if there's a shit leader and he's using the sledgehammer and screaming in people's faces, which is a method, and that's the way he's choosing to lead, you can take that method and you can take that tool and put that in your toolbox, but you have to decide whether or not that's something that you want to use as your way of your leadership style, and you have to cultivate that. And what I did is I took that to heart, and really I think my style developed into wanting to basically being able to read my soldiers and read people, and what's it going to take to motivate this soldier to do what I need them to do? Or if this guy's having a hard time, does he need tough love? Does he need a boot in the ass, or does he need an arm around his shoulders? Does this guy need someone to get nose to nose with him and let him know what's up? Or does this guy need somebody to say, hey, come on, Corporal, throw on your PT. Let's go for a jog, and then, tell me what's going on while we're running. And being able to cultivate that and have all those tools at your disposal, but then having the ability to know which tool to use with which soldier needs it. I found that to be my most effective style of leadership. And it was really developed through the circumstances of my active duty and my interactions that developed that more than anything.
Two things that I noticed on deployment, that there are two major stressors. Okay, you have the stress of combat in itself and being in, every day you're tired, you're dirty, you smell, you had eaten once today, all that going to your head. And then the other side, you have home, your family, your people are deployed away from their kids, their wives, their husbands, whatever the case may be. You're away. As a leader, what did you find more difficult to deal with the soldiers underneath you, like their experiences in being in combat zone, or dealing with their home life? Because now you have people that have emotions, that have problems going on. Their wife hasn't written them a letter in a week. How do you deal with that? Like, what was more difficult to maintain? Because I feel like a lot of times people could be find the deployment harder because you're away from home, not even just being in a combat zone.
Right.
What you miss most is home. So how do you deal with that?
So kind of segueing from my last answer, you had to read each situation. I had an excellent sergeant underneath me that he had been stop lost about 3 weeks before he was supposed to get out of the military completely. And now here he is deployed. So he was fantastic at his job, but he, it was also had that burden on his shoulders of, I better not get shot or hurt or killed over here, because I was supposed to be out 3 weeks before I even went over here. And, it sounds like a Hollywood script, but it did happen. It happened a lot. Right. Especially as the conflict went on longer and longer in Iraq. So constantly working with him to keep his focus in the game and making sure, but again, he's a sergeant, so I'm not necessarily coaching him. I'm giving him his duties and responsibilities to see to the soldiers underneath him. So that's keeping his focus on that and not dwelling on the fact that he's in Iraq and he shouldn't be. I had another private whose, wife disappeared on him during deployment, and that was a situation where I went to approach the room and say, "Hey, come on, let's go talk about this." And a couple of the other soldiers in the platoon stopped me before I got there, and they said, "Sir, we know you want to help and everything, but we got this. Like he's hurting, but we've got him. We're rallying around him. We're talking him through him. If anything is going south that we think you need to know about, we'll let you know." And in that situation, as the leadership there, you have to realize, okay, the best thing for my soldier in that point, dealing with what he's dealing with, is to not talk to him, is to step back and allow him have the space to be with his brothers, and let them handle the situation, and trust that if they really need me, they're going to come and get me. So there was a lot of that going on, and just the daily fluctuations. Being an officer as a junior butter bar, as a second lieutenant, that's the closest you're ever going to be to soldiers in your entire military career as an officer. So at many times you have to be a counselor, a friend, and at the same time maintain that line of separation of, hey, I'm here for you. I'll listen to you. If you're really hurting and you're homesick and you need to talk, that's great. But just remember, when we're out in sector and I'm telling you to do stuff and we need to get the job done, it's not like oh, well, the LT was my buddy last night. Now he's yelling at me today. It's like, yeah, because I have to maintain that separation. I have to make sure that we as a unit operate, when we get back to the fob, we can talk more then, so that was the unique challenge of being in such an operational tempo like that and dealing with guys that had never deployed before.
Right.
And at the same time, you're figuring out for yourself too, because I had never deployed either, and I'm homesick, and
Right.
I'm scared, and
you have your problems to worry
Yeah.
about, and then you have everybody else's problems to worry about.
Right.
It's not just you, so you have to worry about your own, mental, make sure that you're able to function and do your job, because
Right.
you have your bosses, they're dumping stuff on you, and then you got to dump it on them, and at the same time maintain your ability to lead troops in combat and, give them a hug if they need it. It's a very, the ability to do that is why I think, the U.S. military officers really do an amazing job, because you have to balance so much.
And as a leader, you're an effective leader, your concerns come second to everybody else. It's like being a parent in many ways, which I wouldn't realize until after I had children. And I'm not trying to belittle the soldiers underneath me by calling them children, but I'm saying that relationship, that dynamic where you as a parent or you as a officer serving in a line unit with men that you are responsible for, your concerns come last, and you need to make sure that everything from an operational perspective, okay, I need to make sure that my plan is laid out, that our trucks are fueled up, that we have ammo. But then from the actual self-care of these individuals, hey, are you eating? Are you sleeping? I had to kick guys off the Xbox all the time because Halo was very big at the time.
Yeah.
Let's do daisy chain Xboxes together down the whole hallway of our barracks. And I'd find these yahoos playing at 2 a.m. I'm like, what are you guys doing? We've got an 8 a.m. patrol, and I had to play almost a dad role where I'm disconnecting the power cords, to make sure that they're getting at least 5 hours of sleep before we go out on patrol. And certainly no lieutenant, no officer can do it by themselves. I had excellent non-commissioned officers, excellent corporals and specialists that I relied heavily on, because I can't be out there making sure that the trucks have ammo. I need to make sure that they're ready to go before we go out to the gate, but I can't be running around picking up ammo cans and stuff. And that's where I have to give my plan to my sergeants and trust that they're going to follow the orders I give them, make sure that we're mission capable and ready to go. And in that sense, you're working hand in hand with that leadership team. In an armor unit, you have your platoon sergeant, 2 section sergeants that would mimic the 4 tanks in our platoon. And I had excellent NCOs that I give all the credit in the world, because I could never have been as successful as I was without their support and them doing the absolute greatest job that they ever did. You know it better than I do. The NCO Corps is the backbone of the military. And as much as officers go through leadership training and we can come up with great plans and everything else, those things don't happen without the NCO Corps executing those missions for you. So I was very grateful to be blessed with such a wonderful group of men that I served with that first deployment.
Now you go back for a second deployment. When did you get out of the service completely? When was your EOS and the service?
You got out in April 30th, 2008.
So 2008, you're done. You come back home. Right. How was the adjustment back to civilian life? Now you've been always having to worry about other people.
Yeah.
Always had to maintain, any problems that somebody had to come to you. You're the guy. Now you're back home, adjusting back to civilian life. Did you find it difficult to come back to civilian life after always having, you wake up go for a run, then you have 0900 briefing, 1100 hours, you got, training, it's like everything was very nonstop. And I experienced it was 5 a.m. you're up to 10, 9 a.m. you're ready to go to bed because you got to get up at 5 a.m. the next day. If
Right.
and amazingly, I remember like PTing after a night of drinking. That was always the worst feeling. Like
Yes.
people just running, PTing, throwing up on themselves and just keep going. Like
Just
I
keep
never
going.
seen it. You know, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, when you
I
can
was about to say.
handle that. But
Yeah.
nowadays, I have like one beer, I'm sleeping for 4 days. You know, like it definitely took a toll on me. But
there's the reason why people join the military at 18, because your body can handle the abuse that you put it through. But yeah, exactly.
I definitely abused my body. Now you're adjusting back to civilian life. How was it for you after, like, because I was never an officer. I never had that responsibility of having so much to worry about. I had to worry about me and my fire team. I was in the fire team, 4 guys in a Humvee when we were deployed, and we had a gunner, we had an A gunner, we had a driver, we had a navigator, and that's our responsibility. Doing missions, you had to worry about, I don't know, how many people in the platoon or a company or a squad?
Armor platoon was 16 guys, because we split it up 4 per tank. And so I had 16 soldiers, 15 and myself, that I was responsible for.
That's 16 responsibilities that you have to maintain.
You multiply that by 3 for the 3 platoons, plus a support platoon. So now when I was an executive officer, I never got to company command because I actually switched over to military intelligence 3 years into my service. So I kind of went to a different track and got away from the combat arms. So I never had a company command, but that's in an armor unit. That's 3 times 16 plus the support guys. I'm not good at math, but it's, good 6.
A lot of responsibilities.
Right. 50, 60 guys and their families that you're responsible for. So
now you're home.
Now I'm home.
And it's like, what was that feeling for you that you didn't have to get up and do so much right away?
Right. Home was difficult. Adjustment was very difficult. First and foremost, we had kind of been spoon-fed this notion that there's these executive recruiters out there that their sole purpose in life is to find junior military officers, captains and below, that are leaving the service and integrate them into corporate America, because corporate America wants captains, former military officers to pull into the civilian ranks of their corporations and groom them to ascend up into whatever responsibility that may be. Because the military provides that leadership training and all the intangibles of task management, priority management, and attention to detail, all the things that big companies want. So you kind of were groomed all through ROTC that, hey, don't worry about a job if you decide to get out of the military, because there's going to be these executive recruiters beating down your door, and they're going to, you're going to find a 70 grand a year job with full benefits. It's going to be like picking it up off the street. They're going to be everywhere. And I kind of bought into that. And I didn't really do a whole lot of preparation on my own. And you can go back and forth about how the military didn't prepare people to ETS and transition them to civilian life and everything. Certainly when I got out back in 2008, there was nothing to that effect. There's more of it now, which I understand, which is a help. But again, I don't really put that on them. I put that on me. I didn't take that because I had this idea that I'm going to be taken care of, and I don't have to work.
And something to make on your point.
Yeah,
I wish I would have been better prepared for reentry. Like, luckily, things worked out a certain way for me.
Right.
But like, I wasn't really prepared. Things that I wish I would have been better prepared financially. The military doesn't give you that. Now you're going into the real world. You got your guaranteed pay twice a month. You go party on the weekends. You burn through that money, and guess what? You still got a place to put your head because you have a barracks. You still have, now. Guess what, buddy? You don't pay your bills. You don't have that money to pay your rent. You're on the street. And now we have, you can see with the homeless population with veterans especially, has blown up. There's that sometimes you become too dependent on the service, especially when you get out. Yeah. They sent us to our civilian classes the last 2 weeks. where you could get to grow some facial hair, like, oh, I don't have to shave, like, oh, I'm ready for the real world. No, you're
Right.
not, and you forget. And, like, I wish that there was a better entry back into the civic world. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted
No,
to
that's fine.
that
I
point.
mean,
Like,
from what I understand from speaking to guys that have gotten out since I did, that they do a little bit better job of that, but at the end of the day, in my circumstance, looking back in hindsight, I should have done more to prepare myself for the eventuality that these executive recruiters aren't going to work out. And I didn't. And then when I got out, I only had 30 days of leave saved up. So I had 1 month to land a civilian job before no more check. And about 3 weeks into that, there's no job. I haven't even gotten a friggin' phone call from these recruiters, So that was a very tenuous situation because I was also a newlywed at that point. I had gotten married the year before, about 6 weeks before I deployed on my second deployment. And I spent my first year with my wife overseas, again, adding more long distance to our long distance relationship. Except now I'm 3,000 miles overseas or 6,000, whatever it is, instead of, in Arizona. So that compounded it too, because it's not just about me anymore. I have a wife to provide for. We wanted to start a family. That was a big reason of me getting out. Well, how am I going to start a family with no job? And these recruiters aren't here. And that's where kind of I had my first wake-up call of civilian life of, hey, you got to take those same principles of dedication and attention detail and apply them to getting yourself a job. Now, luckily, I had made some connections. I had some friends that had gotten out ahead of time. They were already established in companies, and they were able to get me in. But then the recession of 2008 hit 6 months later. Right. And I was the first one that had been hired. And so I was the first one I'd been the last one to be hired, rather. So I was the first one to get laid off. And that touched off about 18 months to 2 years of being on unemployment and finding a job and being laid off and being unemployed again, taking jobs that were well below my qualifications just to be bringing some kind of money in. All the same while I'm trying to basically integrate with my wife, and reestablish our relationship over that time, and struggling financially. We're talking about starting a family. I remember having a breakdown in the shower, and she was putting her makeup on or something at the same time, and she heard me crying. And she's like, "What's the problem?" I was like, "You want me to buy a house so we can start a family. Not you want me. Like we want to buy a house to start a family." Not that she was putting on me. We want to buy a house and start a family. I can't afford the fucking diapers, like how am you want me to buy a house? I can't even afford, I don't have a job. I'm working in a Dick's Sporting Goods behind the hunting rifle counter, like I can't even afford diapers. So that was a very, very tenuous time from getting out, dealing with recession, dealing with those family relationships. And then unfortunately, all those extenuating circumstances and extreme stressors, that right at that 18-month point, that's when my symptoms of PTSD came out. And so that was the final capstone on all this other stuff that was going on, where now I'm dealing with post-traumatic stress in a bad way. And I was having horrible nightmares, and being the culture that we're kind of cultivated with, the warrior ethos and all that mindset, there was that stigma of you don't ask for help, you work through it. Well, my way of working through it was, finding solace in the bottom of a bottle, and that only makes things worse. So it took another probably year of me being in denial, and then me slowly coming to the grips with myself that I needed help before I even went and sought out counseling, and I put a lot of people my family, my wife, her family, because we didn't have a place to stay. So I was, staying in my in-laws' place at the time. I put a lot of people through a lot of hurt, as I kind of worked my way through that minefield is what I call it. If I have to explain it to other guys when they're getting out, I say, talk to me first. There's no need for you to navigate this minefield on your own. I've already done it for you. So at least talk to me and I can give you a path through the minefield so you don't have to step on these things the way I did. And some guys listen, some guys don't. And when I say guys, I mean guys and gals. But the adjustment was very, very hard. I've been in counseling for 10 years, since 2009. I think my timelines might be a little off there, but I think that's where I've been in. And that has made the difference,
Does make a difference.
Certainly speaking to someone and learning to deal with the things that you deal with, but also having those stress factors slowly come off. So I finally landed in a good place with employment. And then that in turn, as I moved through the ranks of that job, made the financial concerns a little less, and they're still stressful to this day. But when those stressors come off you a little bit, combined with the counseling, combined with not seeking out those poor choices in terms of those poor coping mechanisms like the drugs and alcohol and everything else, you can start to cope and you can start to really, get on the right track and everything. So even now, 11 years out of the military, you have your bad days, your good days and your bad days, and it's still an adjustment. And in many ways, I don't think that'll ever go away. It's going to live with you. It's part of you, but it does get better. And if I can give a message to fellow veterans that are viewing this, if you haven't and you think you need to, use this as the opportunity, use this as the catalyst to go and seek out that counseling, because it will make a difference if you're hurting.
And I think you touched on it a little bit, is the idea that you're this big soldier, the Marine, you fought and then you're gonna go to somebody for help. Sometimes you feel like, I don't need help. I'm good. I got this. I can push through this. And people don't realize, you coming out of that mindset into the civilian world, which is completely different. Mm-hmm. It's a major adjustment. Yep. And if you're not prepared for the stressors, and then things start flaring up, and people don't realize that things could just flare up if you have a bad week, then and
if you have a bad day, a bad hour,
right, and all of a sudden, you just ready to explode. Those things people don't realize, that there's that transition period that's very difficult. Yeah. And luckily, and I know your family and you for a long time. You have people around you to help you and help you out of it. Not everybody has that.
Exactly.
And, the people that don't have it, there are veteran services that are available. There are counselors that they're trying to improve on that. I know that they're trying to expand, on having counselors available to talk to you and help people. So anybody that's listening, there are those options as well. The experience difference, now that the difference now that you're back in the civilian world and it's been such a long time, and how do you deal with it now to keep it I guess in check? I know I noticed, and I'm gonna assume that you're big into writing now. You're doing a lot of writing. Do you feel that helps you kind of, that's your stress relief, being able to write and type and get that up?
In many ways, yeah, and it's funny you even say it that way, but because I hadn't quite thought about it in those terms in such a long time, because I have been writing. When I first was contemplating going into counseling, I've always been a fairly decent writer. So writing papers, that's why I was a history major in college, because I don't like taking tests. But I can write a paper, no problem. You need a 4-page paper, I'll have it for you in an hour, that kind of thing. Right. So writing has been an outlet. And when I was first contemplating going into counseling, my nightmares were so bad, I wanted to basically document the nightmares so I could hand them off to my counselor so they could see what I've been dealing with, right? And I found that there was a small catharsis with each nightmare where I would wake up and just be on the verge of a breakdown because it was so bad. And I would say to myself, I just got to get to work or wherever. I got to get to my computer or whatever day it was. And I got to sit down. I got to write this out, because somehow in writing out both what the nightmare was and then how I felt because of it, I was expunging that filth. I was getting it out of my body in a way. And that was the beginning of really seeing how writing coped with it. And then, I'm an avid reader. I love fiction. And writing, I started doing that, taking that more seriously, saying, hey, I think I can actually make a shot at being a published author. So that's kind of become my goal now after the military. I have a civilian career. I'm very happy with my job, but I like to have a goal. I like to have something to strive towards and work towards. So I've been writing books since then. And I've written about four, maybe five, depending on the quality of some of those. Some of them might not count as a book, but
Right.
I've put a lot of words down on paper. So, I guess from a volume aspect, it would count as a book. But one of the books I wrote was about an Iraq veteran who transcends and becomes a guardian angel. And that was a very, very cathartic process. I had a very difficult time writing that book because of so much of the experiences that I had tamped down now and that I had thought I had come to be able to live with. They all came raging back, and in certain portions of that book that I wrote, I was very difficult to be around as I was writing that. But that was an even greater step in the catharsis procedure, because I felt like I turned a corner in my own recovery when I wrote that particular manuscript. And then since then, I've just transitioned into all different kinds of genres. I write epic fantasy and espionage thrillers and all those. I have a techno thriller I'm writing right now, another fantasy I'm writing right now. And really, even though it's not the same process in terms of the catharsis of the PTSD, there is an escapism to it, right? Even more so when I'm writing a fantasy story, because those are entire worlds that don't exist in reality, that for an hour or two a night, I'm living in that world. Not only am I living in it, I'm creating it as I go, and
Right.
I can step out of shit I haven't paid the mortgage yet into, knights clashing on a battlefield in some distant magical realm and everything. And for me, I really enjoy it. It gives me
Right.
that ability to escape reality and kind of live in my own space for a little bit, and it's like a breath of fresh air when I do that. So I keep writing. I continue writing. I'm hoping one day that I've got a couple manuscripts out there right now that I'm testing the market with. But I'm hoping one day you'll see my name up on a bookstore shelf somewhere.
Well, I think it's great. I know you have a link. You actually have short stories that you write too, right?
I do. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if anybody wants to read anything that you have, how could they follow up with you? Provide the link or whatever.
Yeah,
Just tell everybody where they can read some of
so
your stuff.
my website is called Fever Dreams, but if you type that into Google, it may or may not come up. So that link is readtrhendricks.com. readtrhendricks.com. READTRHENDRICKS. I determined when I was going down this road that my name was really way, way too long to fit on the cover of a book. So I shortened it to TR Hendricks as a pen name. So it's readtrhendricks.com. That's my short story website. It isn't as updated as frequently as I used to, because I focused to writing the novels. which take much more dedication in terms of time and whatnot. So I think my most recent story is from April or May of this year. So I haven't put a new one up in a while, but I mean to. I just keep getting these ideas for books that I write. So, but you can go back a little ways. It's been up for about 2 years. There's about a dozen or so stories on there. I'm also on Twitter at ReadTRHendricks. I'm on Instagram at ReadTRHendricks. And I have recently had my first short story published by a literary magazine.
Oh, awesome.
So it's a fantasy short story. It just came out November 1st. It's called Kyanite Publishing. That's KYNIITE publishing.com. And if you follow the tabs on their website, you can go to the Kyanite Press, which is the literary magazine. And I'm in volume 2, issue 1 of that magazine, which is on sale now, and you can order that there and read that short story in that volume. So that's my first stepping stone into the publishing world. I actually had a literary magazine accept my story, and hopefully a full-length novel here soon.
Well, thank you for your service. I want to thank you for taking the time and coming to talk to me today, talking about your life and service and as a veteran. And thank you for sharing what you shared, as far as, a lot of people don't want to share everything, their experiences after. And I appreciate that, because you know what? It helps for other people to know that, leaving that lifestyle, coming back to the civilian world, this is a difficult transition, and that, we could lean on each other still. Like, I still talk to a lot of guys that I served with. I'm sure you have the same connections where you could just always lean on each other. And if, always look for another veteran to help you get through it, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. I want to remind everybody that's listening on the audio platform to subscribe. If you're on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, check out the YouTube channel, The Exchange. It's on YouTube. We have live videos up, short video clips. If you subscribe on there, you'll get all the bonus videos that I put up as well. And please, everybody, check out Tim's website. Check out his readings. He's a great writer. I've looked at some of these short stories. He's very good. So I recommend that you check it out. Thank you very much, Tim, for coming on and sharing your experience with me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's a great time, and happy Veterans Day to everybody out there, and God bless America.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Take care.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Subscribe to the show, like it, and comment. Also, if you want the audio version because you're traveling, you're in a car, and you can't watch it, you don't have time to watch the episodes, you could go in the show notes. There is a link provided. Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, whatever your pleasure may be. Join me and listen via the audio versions on those other platforms, okay? But I really like YouTube. I like the way it's working out. And if you can, subscribe. The more subscribers, the better the content I can provide you, and it costs you nothing. So I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.